VUCA here, and welcome to today's edition of The Transition Guy. Now joining me is Mark Devine, keynote speaker, ex-Navy SEAL, entrepreneur. Have I missed anything out?
Author, I guess.
Thank you for joining.
I appreciate that. Nice to be here.
So Mark, you got a big keynote today. Share with us what the message is going to be.
Well, I'm at Scaling Up, Bernhard's organization, working with mid-market companies and entrepreneurs and executives to help them figure out how to take their business to the next level. And my training and experience, and I'm one of those as well, but I'm also, as you mentioned, a former Navy SEAL, retired as a commander. I've led teams, around the world in elite special ops kind of gnarly environments, but I've also built several different businesses and struggled with scaling myself, so I understand some of the dynamics, and I've applied a lot of what I've learned in my years as a SEAL into that domain. But one of the most important things that I've learned in my life didn't come from the SEALs, actually. It came from my long engagement with Zen meditation and yoga and integrative, training practices. And I have a deep history with that, starting with Zen when I was 20 years old, and you'll hear that story in the keynote. So I'll get back to that. My main message is that every leader today, every leader and entrepreneur is hitting the wall of VUCA. VUCA is volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Things are changing so fast, things appear to be accelerating. Technology is, the tech tsunami is on us. And what used to work for us isn't working anymore. Our weapons aren't sharp anymore.
No, that's
and our
really
bullets
true.
aren't hitting their target. And yet we have no new models for how do we train the leader so that he can become all the things we've heard from all these other great leaders. He can become, or she can become, more engaged, more authentic, more vulnerable, more compassionate, more caring, more expansive, taking the perspective of the millennial and the Gen Zer and the older worker, and how do they bring more of themselves to the table? And so what my message is that everyone listening to this is capable of 20 times more than you think you are, but you've got to train yourself, and to train yourself in different ways than you're used to. And I've developed a training model that does just that, and it's had extraordinary effect in the special ops community, to the fact where now the SEALs and pararescue and others are using aspects of our training model to actually now train a more complete and holistic and integrative warrior, which is very exciting to me.
And the sort of the comparisons between whether you're in the SEALs or whether you're an entrepreneur,
yeah.
It's transferable, right?
100%. I mean, we're just leading in different domains, different environments. The risk to life and limb is much higher in a special ops environment, but you're still engaging the hearts and minds of your individuals and your team and your customers, right?
Right.
Who might, the soldier in Iraq, the customer is going to be the villagers in Iraq and the Iraqi government, and also the U.S. The U.S. government and the U.S. people. You got to be considerate of all of that. And so in order to be considerate of all your customers and your team, you've got to be very aware. And so the question is, how do you train awareness? Right? There's a big distinction I make between horizontal skills and vertical skills. Horizontal skills develop you across, a range of things that allow you to do things better. And I would say a lot of the skills we're talking about here at Scaling Up are horizontal skills. And even people who are looking at character, they're looking at a perspective of horizontal skills, like leveraging technology to create a more engaging workplace, for example, what Santiago was talking about. That's not necessarily going to make you as a leader a better person. Now, vertical skill are those aspects of who you are that actually evolve your character. And what I've learned through my many years of engagement with this type of training is that every individual has the potential to become self-evolutionary. They don't have to get stuck. We don't have to worry about whether we're a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. We literally activate this awesome potential we have, and then we train every day to access and evolve that potential to greater and greater capacity. And what that leads to is greater and greater capacity for performance, greater capacity for service, and deeper connections. And so, one of the things you mentioned to me, Peter, was that in all of your coaching clients, the entrepreneur seems to be, and even the CEO is often feeling very alone.
Yep.
Right, because they don't feel comfortable bringing, their vulnerabilities, their failures to the team. And what I'm going to say as a Navy SEAL is that's absolutely essential. And that loneliness needs to stop or can stop. So the more you train yourself in the integrated practices, the more accessible you become. And I use the term authentic. I don't love the term vulnerable because I'm a Navy SEAL. We don't like to be vulnerable, but kudos to Brene Brown for her terrific work. I use the term authentic. Authenticity is meaning you're able to access more of your heart's intelligence, your gut's intelligence. Use your, embody, your whole body becomes your leadership vehicle. We call that embodied leadership. And when you develop this, then you show up as who you are with your team. You don't wear a mask that says, I can't share that my kids, just had this major disaster. Or, for me, I'll give you a good example. My son, Devin, is the most incredible kid in the world. I love this guy to death. There's no way he will ever be a Navy SEAL. I can't even get him to work out, right? Now, most Navy SEALs would be embarrassed about that, or they would just hold that information in. I talk openly about it because he's got all these amazing qualities. That's just not one of them. You know what I mean? I don't look at it as a failure. He doesn't do well in school. I don't look at that as a failure either. You know what I mean? He's into cars. I'm fascinated with that. I'm like, I don't know anything about cars and rebuilding cars and everything like that. So everyone at my work knows this, and they love Devin, right? And so I try to, try to bring this idea that we can. It's better to be whole and integrated, and authentic and real. And wear your failures on your sleeve with your staff. They want to see that you're a normal person.
This is quite interesting because quite a lot of my clients, they tend to be sort of 45 years and up.
Yeah.
And very much, they're a byproduct of industrial age thinking. Mm-hmm. And industrial age thinking, to be honest with you, it was an era of carrot and stick. And all they did was beat the shit out of people. They had the shit beaten out of them. It was like an abusive relationship. And they see that whole thing around sort of that authenticity or whatever you want to call it, turning up and being yourself. They see it as a weakness.
That's right. Well, this is what I mean by if you're doing the same things and expecting different results, stand by. That's the definition of insanity. So being, we'll use Brene Brown's term, showing up as vulnerable, exposing your weaknesses to your team, that's a strength, actually. It's always been a strength, even though it's been perceived as a weakness. Because what you're essentially doing is separating yourself from yourself. And if you're separated from yourself in that regard, then you're separate from your staff. And you're separate from everybody else. And separation is what has led to suffering. And separation of an individual from himself, an individual from nature, and from his team, and from other cultures is what's caused most of the mess in the world. And so, but having said this is not easy work. The work of emotional development and what I call staring down the wolf, which is basically that's the title of my next book, comes out in 2020. It's all about how the hardest work that I've ever taken on, the hardest training I've taken on, is exactly what you're talking about, staring down the fears that were created in very early childhood through trauma, the first 20 years of our life, that caused us to think that we were a certain type of person, or caused us to wear a certain mask, or caused us to have this negative reactionary conditioning, which leads to things like thinking that it leads to all biases, racial, age, sexual bias, orientation bias. It leads to rutted thinking around religion and dogma. Right, it leads to perfectionism and elitism and exceptionalism. Right, it leads to closing us off to other people's ideas, and this is this is common. Right, most of humanity is stuck in one of these fear-based reactionary modes, and I use the Native American analogy of the fear wolf and the courage wolf. And the fear wolf is basically the brain. And we're all, we've heard throughout this seminar, through the summit, how we have negative conditioning, the world's a negative place. Our brain is wired, right, to be a negative machine. The courage wolf resides in the heart. What I know, I started working on the courage wolf when I went to SEAL training. Prior to that, nothing. And I was in the corporate world for 4 years before I went to SEAL training. I'm
Right.
a CPA, was with Coopers and Lybrand and Arthur Anderson and Payne Weber. Nowhere was there any heart-centered conversations, no dialogue about it. It was all
Stick.
It was all, carrot and stick, and it was all fear wolf conditioning and horizontal training. When I went into the SEALs, I recognized that as soon as I committed to that, I needed to commit to my team. And when I had to commit to my team, and some people got this, but most didn't, I said, okay, I'm giving myself to you, and we're going to get through this training together. And because I know that when I get into the SEAL team, when, not if, we're all going to make this, by the way, when we get to the SEAL teams, we're going to have to rely on each other for our lives. And I need to trust you, and I need to respect you, and we need to be courageous. And courage comes from the heart. I mean, the root of the word is heart, core, in French. And so that was an early training for me in getting out of my head and into my heart. And every time we did that, when I, with my team, faced something that was incredibly daunting, and SEAL instructors and the whole training is daunting. I mean, in the sense that you said earlier, Peter, that it's the hardest training in the world, it is. It is the hardest training, physically, mentally, emotionally. It's the riskiest. People die in it. But when you approach it from the courage with heart, with your team, and this attitude of, we got this, nothing's going to stop us, right? We're going to courageously go forth and conquer this, then it becomes really enjoyable. And you can do anything. Like, that's where you find that 20x power. But it's hard to develop that in the corporate realm. So that's one of the things that I've worked really hard on, trying to figure out how do you develop heart, and how do you develop intuition, and how do you access a whole mind embodied leadership capacity.
And I think with this, if you take the millennials for an example, I think they're far more open to that.
Yes.
I think they're naturally that way inclined.
Well, they grew up with things like yoga being, even though most people think yoga is stretchy, bendy, or sweat exercise, the root of yoga is, it's profound. It's the oldest personal development training system known to man. I first came through it through the martial arts. Martial arts and yoga are, two sides of the same glove or coin. So these kids these days grew up with stuff that was very foreign to, let's say, our generation. I'm in my 50s. And so I was fortunate enough to just stumble upon it really early in my life, right? And so I've been exposed and grew up with it, and now I recognize this extraordinary effect it had on my brain, my body brain, my mind brain. And so it's become my life's passion to teach other people this. Having said that, you're right, younger generation, they take to it, really quickly, and they love this, and they're really excited to start learning the process. The older generation, over 40 or 50, says, boy, I wish I had this when I was 20.
Or they'll say this, they're in two camps. It's either, yes, I wish I had this when I was in my 20s, or let me go and find some alternate horizontal training.
Yeah.
And because that's going to fix my problem.
That's right. You'll have a lot of people who shy from this, but we're finding more and more of our clients, the people we're training, are open to it. I mean, heck, I was talking to Vern about it. He was like, I need this, right? It's my blind spot. Right? More successful people are realizing that what they've been doing isn't working any longer, and they're getting diminishing returns out of it, and those returns have hit a wall. The only way through VUCA is essentially to let go of everything you thought you used to control, and to take a serious look at the only thing you can control, and that's your own development as a human being. And then from there, what we do is ask people to look at the vertical training of your character, of your sense of self, your conscious awareness. And we can talk about that with many different words, and you can look at it from many different perspectives. Even your access to your spiritual power, your capacity to engage with your spiritual nature, and your, what the yogis would call that causal energy that you have. It's all trainable. And so we want you to essentially take a look at that and elevate the criticality of your integrative training, your vertical development, to the same level of importance as eating and sleeping. Yeah. Like most people don't think, unless you're fasting, of going without eating in a day. And most people don't think about going without sleeping unless you're a Navy SEAL going through Hell Week or in combat, or you just have to get this project done, or you're a PhD or a medical student, cramming for an exam. Okay, so those are rare cases, but generally speaking, most people don't go without sleep. So why do we go without training ourselves to be our highest potential? Nobody does it, right? Except for very, very few who've been able to tap into that. The other thing, Peter, is we don't have training models here in the West, or developmental paths like the martial arts of the East or the Tibetan, Buddhism or yoga. And when those things were ported over, they were ported over either in a very culturally nuanced way that is not accessible to most people, or it left behind the most important parts. Like martial arts became just kicking and punching and becoming a badass, and yoga became stretchy, bendy, sweaty. And we left behind the vertical development.
Is it lost in training? It's lost in translation.
Lost in translation, right.
But the challenge was, I think the people bringing it over weren't comfortable bringing it over.
They thought it wouldn't land, or maybe they didn't understand it themselves.
Yeah.
I
mean, this is really important from the point of view, because I said to you earlier, this is not really what you would expect. This level of development, you just wouldn't expect from a SEAL. So you talk about the badass element, etc. You would expect the horizontal skills, etc., to being able to do stuff. But actually, the true power comes in the vertical self.
Right.
Because your ability to see things becomes more clear.
Yeah. Well, again, I think some of that was developed as a result of being a leader in the SEALs, where you are taking men, in the future women, but right now it's only men. You're taking men into combat where you may not all come home. Yeah. We endeavor to bring everyone home. It may not be me, or maybe me that doesn't come home. And so in order to do that, you take some things very seriously that other people just pay lip service to, right? For example, brutally honest conversations. We've heard about how, some of the best organizations, they really clash, and it's okay to clash, and it's okay to cuss, and it's okay to fight. Same thing in the SEALs, right? It's okay. Not only that, it's like required. You get to the bottom of whatever personality issues is holding you up from performing or working together, or else you get off the team. So it's okay to be brutally honest in your conversation. It's okay to call people out on their bullshit because their lives are on the line and the mission is on the line. It's too important. Well, guess what? If you could mentally elevate the risk level for the average entrepreneur or leader to that same height where, like, this is the death of the business. Yeah. Either we get to this level where we can have these brutally honest conversations and we can call each other out in a way that's not going to be demeaning or not, we never demeaned each other, or it was never personal. It was all about the mission and the team. But dude, if you're the one that's holding back the mission or the team from accomplishing the mission,
you head to the conversation, right?
You don't just send a piece of paper to HR, or an email, or you don't do whistleblowing. You call that person out.
And I think that's the big problem that we've got today, is that people don't have those conversations. They don't feel comfortable having those conversations. And unfortunately, the things that need to be said don't get said. And
and by the way, that's taught as a horizontal skill.
Yeah.
Like, I went to the critical conversations, great training, but you can't have a critical conversation as a horizontal skill unless you've got the courage as a vertically developed leader to go in and stare someone in the eye and say, this is a really important thing. I need to have this discussion with you. It's not personal. This is, critical for the mission of the business and also for your own development. This is what we need to talk about.
The one thing I liked about the whole sort of BUDS training, it's over a set period of time. Mm-hmm. And your Hell Week is literally a Hell Week.
Right.
What most entrepreneurs don't quite understand, so many of them anyway, is that actually they live Hell Week for 2 or 3, sometimes 5, 10, 15 years. Mm-hmm. And we're not talking about sort of necessarily being in the cold water or anything, but the sleep deprivation due to stress and all of that stuff. Because they're not dealing with the vertical stuff, right, they just have a really long period of absolute shit, to be honest with you.
Yeah, long period of like combat. Feels like combat.
It does feel like combat for a lot of people.
The brain, the fear wolf, is going to put the body in a state of fight or flight throughout most phases of an entrepreneur and an executive's life, because they haven't learned the skills of managing that and recovering and balancing the body-mind.
And that's when you're talking about
those are key skills.
And you're talking about your yoga and everything, and a lot of the clients that I end up picking up, actually do suffer from adrenal fatigue
Yeah.
without actually doing exercise, where they're just living their entire life on adrenaline,
Yeah.
and eventually it just all
It shuts down and
yeah.
they have a breakdown. Yeah, that's all avoidable. I mean, in fact, that's really the first order of business for all leaders, to get back into balance. And so we teach, we have 6 pillars for that. The first and most important one is breath. So we teach a breath control practice. We call it box breathing. That alone is transformative. And we treat it as a daily practice, part of your morning ritual. And then integrated movement. So getting, to start moving your body. A lot of times, people are actually exercising and driving themselves into the ground through their exercise. A lot of feels. In fact, that was something that was a problem in the SEALs. You can exercise and think you're doing yourself good and be driving your adrenals and your fight or flight syndrome. So if you're doing high intensity exercise 6 days a week, that's not very healthy, right? So maybe twice a week, and then a nice yoga session 2 or 3 times a week, and a long walk in nature, or swim in the ocean, or if you have it, or a pool. And so we teach that to get a really balanced exercise and movement program. And then every training time, every session that you train becomes an integrated training session. So let's say, for instance, it is my high intensity day, then I have a preparatory practice, and this doesn't take a lot of extra time, but I have a preparatory practice which includes my breath control, my box breathing. It includes a concentration and a visualization and a calming and centering practice. And then I, go in and engage in the workout. While I train, we practice the big 4 skills. Controlling the breath, breathing through our nose, right there. If you take nothing else from this conversation, learn to slow down your breathing and breathe through the nose, because that's going to trigger the parasympathetic nervous system, which is rest and digest. So during a workout, you're working, let's say you're swinging the kettlebell, boom, you set it down, you're in fight or flight, your sympathetic nervous system is racing, your heart rate is up. You've got 3 breaths to recenter. Shut your mouth, slow the inhale in through the nose, and then double the length of time out through the nose or through the mouth. SEALs call that tactical breathing. And clear your mind. And then re-engage. Right? Boom, boom, boom. And so now you got this yin and yang. You're driving hard, and then you pause and recover. Same thing with SEALs in a firefight. Boom, 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 engage the target, pause, breathe, scan the environment, see what's happening. Maybe we need to move position, get off the X. There's something else coming up. My teammate over there is running out of ammo. This person just got injured. Uh-oh. It doesn't make sense for me as a leader to be on the gun right now. Anyways, that's an aside. There's so much here. After the workout, I go back to my calm space with my journal. I go back to my breathing. I calm my heart rate down through the tactical breath, 4 count in, 8 count out, nice and slow. Then I go back and visualize how the workout went. We call that a recapitulation. Recap it.
Yep.
What did I learn? What went well? What could I do better? And then I check into my whole body, because we learn how to use our whole mind through my training, and say, what does this workout mean for my next training session, which is tomorrow, or for some of us later in the day? Does it mean I need to shift fire? And maybe since I worked a little hard, or maybe I felt a little twinge, or I get the signal that I need to back off, maybe I change my plan and do yoga tomorrow instead of that long run. And that training session then becomes an integrated vertical development session instead of just a workout. And that's part of the problem here in the West, is we segmented the body. So the body's over there, we'll take care of that. We'll go to the doctor every once in a while and get a checkup. We'll go to the gym and look good in the bathing suit. But then, what? So, and then the mind is trained by, academic and horizontal skills development. And then what about emotions? Well, we don't really train them until everything falls apart, and then we have to go to a therapist. Well, what about our intuition? Certainly don't train that, not in the West. And what about our non-quitting spirit, our alignment, our connection and to a higher power, and our serviceability, our ability to serve others? Do we train that? Most people just take that for granted, or it's a platitude. So we want to train these every day in a sensible fashion. We call that a 5-mountain training plan. The 5 mountains are physical, mental, emotional, intuitional, and spiritual. And you build yourself a training plan, and you have morning training, your evening training, and then the training that you do around your physical movement, which I just described.
Great. I mean, and you have so much material. You could just go on for.
I could, yeah, sorry about that.
No, you have got so much.
Get down these rabbit holes and I've
and
crawl myself back up.
And it's so important. I mean, this stuff is really important for entrepreneurs, and they really need to, for those people that don't do the vertical development, it needs to happen. If people want to sort of explore your vertical development in more detail, what do they need to do?
You mean to get started or to learn more?
To learn more about what you
us?
do, how
Okay.
you do it, etc., engage with you. What do they need to do?
Well, I've got, there's a couple book resources. I've written 4 books and I got a 5th coming out. If you're into physical, real hardcore physical training and you want to train like a Navy SEAL, then 8 Weeks to SEAL Fit is a great place to start for that, and our SEAL Fit training. And then we have these really cool hardcore physical trainings called the Crucibles. One of them is their model at their Navy SEAL Hell Week training. One's 50 hours long and nonstop, around the clock, just like Hell Week. And so you can experience that, and it's really extraordinary training, but not for the faint of heart. And then for executives and leaders, we have a program called Unbeatable Mind. And there's a book that I wrote called Unbeatable Mind as well, which describes what I've been talking about here with Peter, this 5-mountain integrative vertical development training. And how you can begin to use the tools such as box breathing and visualization and concentration and feeding the courage wolf and front sight focus, micro goals and task orientation and OODA loop and all this stuff, how you start to employ that into a daily training plan so that you can start to access more of your potential and your power. And so we have coaching. We've got a new program, about 100 coaches in training right now, so we'll be able to do executive coaching, coach teams. We work with both corporate teams and leaders through Unbeatable Mind. And the last thing I'll say is if you're more of a yogi type and you're into martial arts or yoga, then we have a program called Kokoro Yoga. We have tons of SEALs and firefighters, first responders, and lots of women as well. And it's meant to be a personal practice. Like originally, yoga, martial arts were all taught in a studio, but it was meant to be so that you didn't have to go to the studio eventually, right? You just do it on your own. And so Kokoro Yoga, we've got a video resource, an online program, and we're always adding new videos to it. And so you got visualizations and meditations and concentrations that are all anywhere from 5 to 20 minutes long. You got all the breathing practices, you got all the movement practices, and it's really extraordinary. That's called Kokoro Yoga. I have a book called Kokoro Yoga. Kokoro Yoga online is actually found at unbeatable.com as well.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So there is an absolute shed load, probably quite overwhelming for a number of people. You're going to have to take time to digest it, probably rewatch this.
We'll have to come back and just focus on one thing next time, right?
Absolutely.
The big 4 skills, for instance.
But I mean, the key takeaway from this is, while we can sort of hide from things and throw ourselves into horizontal development, you can do the horizontal development all you want. If you don't do the vertical development, you're not going to get the best out of your horizontal development. It's like you can train your mind all you want, but if you're not going to do the physical activities and make sure that your body's healthy, if your body's not healthy, your mind's not going to be healthy, etc. So you've got to do the work in all areas.
Yeah. You don't want to just train to do good or do better. You want to train to be better so that you can be better while you do better and do good.
Absolutely. Now, thank you so much for today.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
Time.
If anything resonates with you and you want to explore things in more detail, head over to VUCA.com and get in touch. And remember, failing to learn is learning to fail.